past week, I was able to attend Fantastic Fest 2022. While there, I watched 16 movies in the theater, and then I watched one more movie using their at-home program. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 17 Fantastic Fest movies that I saw from the least best to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. Usually on my channel, I talk about a lot of big, mainstream, blockbuster franchises, but that's not all I watch, and that's not all I enjoy, and it's unhealthy to only consume one type of film and television. So each year I try to attend Fantastic Fest. It's a genre film festival here in Austin where they play a bunch of horror, sci-fi, action, foreign films, and a few of them, they have a couple headliners that are very mainstream and will get a wide release and are from a major studio, but the vast majority of what they play are more kind of independent, lower budget, smaller things. And so I just want to watch more types of movies, and hopefully I can share some of them with you and introduce you to some lesser known, less promoted films. Attending Fantastic Fest it's a really cool environment because it's all at one movie theater. So after you watch a movie, you might go into the bathroom and the director is just standing there at the urinal. That happened to me twice during the film festival where the guy literally just finished a Q&A after the premiere of his movie and people are talking to him while he's trying to walk up to a urinal. Likewise, like Scott Derrickson, Ryan Johnson were just attending the festival, so I walked by them and stood next to them in the lobby multiple times. And there's just a bunch of other movie critics attending to watch movies to review them. So my buddy Cody Leach came to town, stayed at my house for the whole festival. We actually did a little bit of sightseeing, went to some of the shooting locations for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. Then Chris Stuckman was attending, so I got to talk with him a whole bunch after multiple movies. That was just really cool. With all that said, let's kind of dive into all the movies that I watched, and I felt like I had a good time with pretty much everything that I watched. Some of them weren't great, but I appreciated all the movies that I did watch, even if they were my least favorite. Coming in last place is Birdemic 3. You might be wondering, wait a minute, was there a Birdemic 2? Yes, there was. It came out 10 years ago, and here we are today with Birdemic 3. And we watched this at the world premiere at midnight, and to set the stage for the context of how they played this movie, the director, producers, stars were all in attendance, and before the movie started, they handed out a shot of tequila for everyone in the room so that they'd be a little bit loopier or drunk while they were watching the film. That's the context of watching this movie. Likewise, when the birds started attacking, Tim League, the guy that runs Alamo Draft House and the Fantastic Fest, started throwing birds, like little prop birds, at the audience. That's the context of watching this movie. It was a lot of fun. It was very memorable. And Birdemic 3 is just as bad as the previous two Birdemic movies. Just unbelievably incompetent in terms of every single aspect of filmmaking, except some of the charm is gone because when you 12, 13 years later, you're still making a movie this incompetent. Feels a little bit like you're trying to make a movie this incompetent. Like, if you haven't seen the first Birdemic, I mean, it feels like every actor is reading their dialogue off of a card. Like, the person directing has never watched a movie before and has no knowledge of how to frame a shot. The audio cuts in and out. The bird sounds when they attack are like, yeah, ah, on loop every single time. So for like 45 minutes of the movie, you just keep hearing, like higher and shriekier. When they start shooting guns, it's the tiniest gunshot you've ever heard. The bird effects are literally just like stock footage of birds that you would pull off pre-keyed green screen off of YouTube, just dropped on it. I mean, it looks terrible. It's acted terrible. It's just as bad as the other ones. But this one has better production values because there's drone shots. So it was fun to be in the room for the world premiere. Like after the movie, they had the guy that sings a song in the first movie as well as the second as well as the third. He like sang a song live in the room and we're all supposed to dance to it. And so there's all sorts of wacky stuff that happens. A fun experience. Like I don't regret going to this terrible movie because it was really fun to watch this particular bad movie. Oh yeah, and then they did a Q&A, which was really awkward because they treated it straight. They're asking the actors, what drew you to this role? Like, they're in Birdemic. They just wanted to be in a movie. I don't know what you're looking for here. But so it was a little bit uncomfortable as they were treating this very goofy movie like it was a serious film. Number 16, Kids vs. Aliens. This is a new movie from the director of Hobo with a Shotgun, and it's an expansion of a short that he did in VHS 2 about kids being abducted at a party by aliens. And it's going for kind of that Stranger Things, Goonies, It vibe of teenagers, tweens being tweens, and there's the bully in the mix, and then they have to battle some sort of supernatural being that shows up, whether it's Pennywise, whether it's stuff in Stranger Things and the Demogorgon, or in the case of this one, it's aliens trying to abduct them. So it's that kind of genre. That's what drew me to it, because I'm a big fan of most of the movies and TV shows in that category. This one didn't really work for me. And it's tough to say how much of it was budget limitations and they tried to do something too big for what their budget would allow, how much of it was just the intentional aesthetic that they went for, where the director, directed Hobo with a Shotgun, this grindhouse aesthetic, but the parts didn't really come together for me, where you have these ultra crass teenagers dropping F-bombs, and then you have aliens that look like they're out of Goosebumps or something like that. I mean, it's just kind of like the putties from Power Rangers and stuff like that. Just totally unconvincing, very childish, combined with like very crass R-rated stuff. And just everything, like I liked it less as it went along. When it was just kind of the kids being the kids, and there's a party that's thrown, and there's the bully that you don't really trust, but you're not quite sure. I was kind of digging it. It would have been actually quite a bit higher up on this list. But once it kind of turned into the alien stuff, I just don't think they had the budget to pull it off correctly, or they went for a design that I just couldn't buy into at all. And likewise, where it goes with how the bully in it is just so over the top, sadistic and cruel that it wasn't satisfying, because he didn't feel like a real human. He just felt like evil incarnate. And you get to the end of it and it just wasn't very satisfying. There's just a lot of stuff that went down in it in the back half that it didn't work for me. So a movie that I wanted to like going into it, I kind of dug it at the beginning, but of these types of movies, is probably my least favorite of the ones that I've seen. Number 15, VHS 99. Point of reference, I haven't seen any of the prior entries in the VHS franchise. This was my introduction to VHS. It was at a midnight screening at a pretty late into the film festival. I think it was the 7th day of the film festival, midnight screening. So I was pretty exhausted as I was watching it. And as it's like a handheld camera film about found footage, I was getting physically ill and nauseous by the back half of it. When it started getting to the last two sequences, last two shorts, I was actively looking around whenever people were walking around with the camera, because I was nauseous. All of that might have affected how much I enjoyed it. I think the given nature of the VHS franchise is that they're going to be pretty hit or miss. They're shorts from different directors. In the case of, I guess, the last couple, they're picking a year to pick the aesthetic vibe of pop culture at that time and letting the people run with it. And for that reason, like, it superficially, it did a lot of things where I was like, hey, I remember that from the 90s. Oh yeah, that's a lot of fun. A couple of the segments I thought were pretty effective. There's one about like a girl being buried alive, and I've got enough claustrophobia, like, hopefully, if you're trying to kill me, I'm going to give you spoilers for how to really screw me up, or life hacks for how to screw me up. Being buried alive is like, that for me would be the worst way to die. And so it's about someone being buried alive. And so that one really freaked me out a little bit while I was watching it. So it was pretty effective. It kept kind of like creating that, what's going on here situation. But then other ones, like there's one about a rock band that it felt like a 15-minute setup for a quick little punchline. Just it felt too long for how little it paid off with the supernatural stuff showing on. It's just you're annoying characters that are just so over the top, and then 30 seconds of carnage at the end. And other ones kind of that similar vibe of a lot of setup for just real quick payoff at the end, and just the setup wasn't worth that little payoff. So I enjoyed some of them. There were things I appreciated about them. With a short, you're able to go so weird, wild, and wacky that I enjoyed that kind of energy. Some of them had a little bit of a clever twist because of that. But overall, especially watching it at midnight with so much shaky cam, handheld cam, so much like VHS crackle to cut between things and just overall, it wasn't really for me. Next up, Shin Ultraman, and this is one that I wasn't actually able to watch at the festival itself. I watched at Fantastic Fest on home on this television right here just a couple of hours ago. I wanted to watch it at the festival, but the time frame for when it actually played was just tricky for us to get to, so we ended up sitting that one out. So I was pretty happy when I discovered it was on the at-home edition of the festival. So I checked it out this morning, and it was one I was curious about because I actually watched a little bit of Ultraman back in the 90s. Whenever the Power Rangers kit came in, they were trying to find all sorts of different things they could import from Asia and convert for tweens. And I was in the perfect age right when Power Rangers came out that they were marketing to me. And I'd actually watched a little bit of Ultraman even before it came over. My family went to Hong Kong when I was in the 5th grade. This is a year or two before Power Rangers came over. And they just had these Ultraman toys. So I bought some Ultraman toys and I saw a little bit on the television. It wasn't in English. I didn't know what was going on. But I was introduced to Ultraman just a little bit before he actually kind of came across the pond, and they tried to bring him over. He wasn't nearly as successful as the Power Rangers, of course. But so I was just curious about it, and especially it's Shin Ultraman. 78 years back, they did Shin Godzilla, kind of revamp of the Godzilla franchise. Ironically, I actually did watch Shin Godzilla during Fantastic Fest in 2019. It wasn't part of the festival. I just watched it at home because someone that I was going to meet up there, Mr. Robinson, he had asked me about it, and so I watched it so I could talk with him about it at the festival. So ironically, at Fantastic Fest 2019, I watched Shin Godzilla. So just for all those reasons, I was like, let me check out what they're going to do with Ultraman. Didn't turn out to be for me. I think it's kind of an acquired taste. If you like the Japanese style of these monster movies, you'll probably enjoy this. But if you're not used to it, it's a very different way of filmmaking. Even the way they frame shots, there's all these sequences where they're having meetings about what's going on, and they do like POV shots of the laptop. People sitting at their laptop, and it's like the camera's the laptop, just shooting it like down from a table up at the person, just really odd shots. And the whole thing kind of has moments like that. Parts where he kind of Ultramans up, uses his beta capsule to get large. It's like a still frame of him going like this towards the camera, and it just like zooms in on it. And it just a lot of things that doing research on it, I guess this is the second highest grossing live action Japanese film of the year. So many things in this are very low budget as to the way they do the effects. So it's kind of an acquired taste, and I appreciated being able to check it out and experience a different way of filmmaking. And what's the modern version of that show that I watched a little bit of back in the 90s? But at the same time, am I like, man, I'm a diehard Ultraman fan? No, I am not. It was just cool to kind of check out this different version of kaiju stories and stuff like that, but not really for me. Number 13, Blood Relatives. As a point of reference, I would say from here on out, I would give everything a thumbs up. The next few are kind of very mixed positive, but I still think they were good enough, they were enjoyable enough that if you're interested in the concept, you should go check them out. And Blood Relatives, this is a real low-budget road trip bonding vampire story about a father and a daughter. It's written, directed, and starring a frequent collaborator of Rian Johnson named Noah. He's one of the guys that I ran into in the bathroom when we watched the movie, and I go waiting in line to go to the bathroom, and he's like right there behind me, and everyone's like patting him on the back, and he walks in, he's like standing at a urinal, people are still walking up to him, patting him on the back. Hey, I loved your movie, man. I was like, what an awkward context to do that. You know he's going to be in the lobby in a minute, right? And so, but for me, it's kind of it's a vampire comedy, and just very low key. Everything about it's low key, and it's about this vampire that discovers that he has a daughter, and she's trying to reconnect with him, and they're trying to adjust and figure out what that means while on a road trip. And the comedy's subtle. The vampire stuff is pretty subtle. The drama's pretty subtle. It all kind of stays right there in the middle from beginning to end, towards like, yeah, that was fine, that was good enough. It didn't overstay its welcome. And at the same time, it never really made me laugh. It never really tugged at my heartstrings. It never had it doesn't have like a great memorable vampire sequence. And so it was like just kind of stuck in kind of that, like, yeah, that's good enough. That was enjoyable enough. I kind of dug that. And, you know, it is very low budget. In particular, you see this where the lead character is a vampire. He can't go out in the sun, so there's a lot of nighttime sequences. And so they had to use a lot of day to night filtering. And there's one sequence where it's really obvious that, like, they shouldn't have done it. It was just so obvious because there's all these hard shadow lines from the sun being right there that you can't get rid of with a day to night filter. So a movie that, you know, if you like kind of like offbeat father-daughter road trip bonding type stories with slightly non-mainstream comedy, this might be right up your alley. It seemed like a lot of people really dug it. For me, it just kind of stayed a little bit too like right there in the middle from beginning to end. I'll also say this, it felt like the first hour of it was like the pilot for a TV show, and then the next 30 minutes is like 3 episodes cut together real quick. And it felt like the movie should have ended at that 1 hour mark and just take that and stretch that out for 90 minutes and leave all this other stuff if you want to do a sequel or whatever. But it felt like that was the emotional peak of it, was like an hour, 50 minutes into it. And then it just kind of kept going and telling more stories about this father and daughter. Number 12, Living with Chucky. Now this is 2/3 a documentary about the making of the original run of Child's Play movies, the original 7 films. It doesn't go into the TV show or the remake at all, but the first 7 films just kind of goes through each film and interviews cast, directors, the guy from Dead Meat, just kind of interviews all these kind of people surrounding those films, their influence, the making of them. And then the final third of it kind of dives into the relationships of the people behind the scenes that kind of formed their own little family behind the scenes, or families that were formed throughout the runtime of these, throughout the life of the franchise, because the series is now 35 years old, and the director of this documentary is the daughter of the puppeteer for Chucky. And then likewise, if you're not familiar with the Chucky franchise, one of the major players of the last 2 films, and then even in the TV show, is the voice of Chucky's daughter. And so they're 30s, 40s, and so when the original Child's Play came out, they were just children. So they grew up with their parents making Child's Play movies, and now they're joining in on the fun in it. And so it kind of touches on the fact that there's a group of these people that have been making Chucky movies for 35 years now, and their children have grown up on the sets of these movies and have known these people and are now peers and friends with them. And it kind of goes into that behind the scenes kind of stuff behind it. It was kind of interesting the way it went. And I wish it had been edited differently so that it's not 2/3 very straightforward. Let's just do talking head documentary about the movies. And then for the third, let's do a bunch of like really emotional stuff about fathers and daughters and growing up and the families that you form on movie sets. I wish that it kind of intertwined that a little bit better, so it was more, had an arc to it of, you know, at the beginning talking about the tension of the dads leaving to go make movies, and later on starting to appreciate what they were doing, and then kind of pay it off with the third act of now they're a part of it. And so it's give them the story that's all in there in the third act, make that the story of the whole documentary. As is, there's like a hard tone shift. You're literally watching it and they're talking about the 7th Child's Play movie, and they're doing like talking head stuff, and then they literally like pan over the camera and they go, "Hey, my dad's over there," and then it literally goes into a conversation about the interview that's taking place, and that's when they introduce it's like does it like that. I don't want to say too much exactly about how it plays out, but there's a lot more to it than just the documentary of it, but I wish it would have been intertwined throughout the runtime of it. So as someone that likes these kinds of things, I liked it. I think it was almost a better version. Like everything was there to be the better elevated version of this documentary, but the way they chose to do it didn't quite get there. Then we have Sick. This is a new COVID slasher written by Kevin Williamson, who famously wrote the original Scream movies, The Faculty, I Know What You Did Last Summer. He was the main horror writer guy of my formative years when I was in high school. So I love his version of horror films. And He's got a new one coming out that is a COVID slasher. And what I mean by that is that the story takes place in April of 2020. And whereas like the Scream movies had all this meta commentary on slasher films of the previous 15 years, this movie has a bunch of like COVID commentary, which for all kinds of different reasons, this movie can step on some toes or just overstay its welcome right out of the gate, because if you're like me, you're already tired of COVID. So a movie reminding you of all the quirky, weird stuff of quarantine during COVID, you might not like that. Likewise, COVID is a sensitive subject for obvious reasons of real, like, we all know people that died and horror, like, just it was a terrible time. So a movie that's kind of making jokes out of some of that and some of the stuff that was going on to try and prevent more people from dying, that might step on a few toes. But once you get past that, there does do quite a few funny things with it. It can be quite amusing to remember all the weird stuff. Like, it starts off at a grocery store, so trying to buy toilet paper in April of 2020. You know, that's a thing in the movie. So from there, it's kind of it's a slasher film about people in quarantine and someone trying to kill them. And the way it plays out, it's very much kind of a chase type of movie where, and that's the way the director described it, where it's not a high body count. It's a few people trying to survive at this big, gigantic lakeside mansion where they're away from everyone else and people are trying to kill them. It's pretty effective at the action, the way that it's shot with wide angles, long takes, just very visceral, like you feel like you're in the middle of it. When someone falls, when someone gets hit, they get hurt. If you hit the killer is hurt. If you hit a person, they're damaged. And so it just kind of feels much more grounded than some other ones. My big issue with it, though, is that it's very COVID heavy at the beginning, it's COVID heavy at the end, and then the middle section, it's just an efficient slasher. It's just an efficient chase movie slasher. I wish there was more COVID in the middle. So they picked a context where people are so quarantined, so isolated, that there's just not a ton of opportunities once things get going to have COVID commentary. So you just have people running, fighting back, hiding, trying not to be heard, all the normal stuff, but not really using the actual hook of the film, COVID slashing. I mean, for like 50 minutes in the middle, there's just very little COVID stuff. So I thought that really held it back for me, of just feeling like it didn't live up to its potential. Kicking off the top 10 is Smile, and this movie actually had its world premiere at Fantastic Fest. I was in the lobby, 10 feet away from the red carpet that the director walked down, snapped all the photos for the world premiere of this movie. I was a part of one of the first audiences. There's 4 theaters, so I was in one of the 4 theaters that was the original audience watching this film. That's a really cool context to watch a film. To just be there with the star of the movie, walking by, doing a Q&A afterwards, and the star of the movie is the daughter of Kevin Bacon. So apparently Kevin Bacon was at the theater too. I think he tried to hide and stay out of the spotlight so to make sure that the spotlight was on his daughter who started the movie and not on him. But they had pictures of him afterwards that they published of like, Kevin Bacon, he was right there on that red carpet, right next to where I was standing. That's a cool context to watch your movie. As for the film itself, you know, the trailers looked really generic to me. The movie was actually a lot better than the trailers. That it follows a pretty familiar horror movie vibe where someone has a thing happen to them in the first 15 minutes and then death follows them for the next week. They try and discover the source of this thing so that they can survive, all while having freaky things happen to them all throughout the week. It follows The Ring, Final Destination. You know, we've seen this sort of film before, but this is a good version of that type of film that has kind of more layers with the characters, more themes that it's exploring. Just does some creative stuff with kind of how it gets trippy and it gets in the lady's head, so the movie itself is an unreliable narrator for the audience. And the director just does a good job of building tension just in general. This is another one where it kind of lost me a little bit in the end, though, where the film set up multiple different things where I felt like I was thinking of more interesting ways to end the movie than what they went with. It just plays out pretty straightforward the way all of these movies ends, despite they had all of these things that they did. that they introduced rules and dynamics that you go, oh, I bet they're going to do this. I bet she'll think to do this. I bet he'll do this. I bet. Nope. Just plays out straightforward. And that really disappointed me with how that played out. So, generally speaking, a lot better than the trailers made it out to be. It is following a familiar formula, but a good version of that formula. Number 9, Hellraiser. And this movie was actually a secret screening. We went into the theater not knowing what we were going to watch. Everyone had their guesses. My guess actually was Hellraiser. And then they announced we are seeing Hellraiser, and this was, once again, the world premiere of this film. We were the first audience to see it in a theater, which is, once again, a very cool context to watch a movie. And then afterwards, the director, stars, all kind of came out for a Q&A. As a point of reference, I watched the original Hellraiser for the first time just a couple weeks back. I'd seen the first hour or so of it 20 years ago and then like fell asleep in the middle of it, which I don't know how you fall asleep watching that movie, but somehow I did. And I never finished it until a couple weeks ago where I watched it in preparation for the new one coming out. And then over the last few days, I've been watching through the other ones. So I've now seen 5 of the Hellraiser films plus this one. So I guess I've seen 6 Hellraiser films. So I'm new to this franchise. I am not a longtime fan. And I'll also add to the mix, it's not exactly my go-to type of horror that I'm into with the way that it does things. So as someone that's a bit of an outsider to the Hellraiser franchise, I thought it was an effective enough new version of the Hellraiser story, where it's not a remake of the original film, but it is a reboot or reimagining of the franchise that kind of takes the mythology and plays a little bit differently with it. And what I appreciated a lot about it is that it puts the Cenobites front and center. And the whole idea of what's your desire, what do you want, what's your objective with the box and the puzzles, what is the thing that you're trying to get out of it? And then the Cenobites actually play very heavily into the plot line, especially when you move into the second half of it and all the crazy wild stuff starts happening. They're like actually front and center. They're not secondary to the plot. It's not about this other guy over here tricking people and then they just show up a little. No. They are front and center, the ones driving the plot and what's kind of going on with it. Also, I appreciated there was a lot of practical effects. I'm sure there's CGI in here too, but you could also tell where you're looking at real things and people in prosthetics. And it has all the unsettling imagery, freakiness that you expect from a Hellraiser film. So this isn't really my go-to type of horror, so it's not one that I like just absolutely loved or was like going bananas for, but it's like I watched it and went, yeah, that seems like a solid continuation that I would think people that like Hellraiser would enjoy this new version. And the chatter in the lobby afterwards was, that's the best one since the original. Next up, Project Wolf Hunting. Now this is a bonkers Korean film. The program for the festival described it as Con Air on a boat, or Korean Con Air on a boat. And that's a decent enough description of the first half of the film. And I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, this is like a really violent, very bloody Con Air on a boat. And then the second half of the movie happens where it just goes absolutely bananas. And it's this whole other thing with genetically engineered people and just freaky bananas stuff happening. I mean, just ultra bloody, ultra gory, arms being cut off, people being ripped to shreds, people having holes punched in their chest. I mean, just bananas. If you like weird, wild, ultra-violent films, be on the lookout for when Project Wolf Hunting comes out, because, man, this one was crazy, crazy, and wild. And I wanted to actually... There's a bunch of things about this movie that make me want to put it higher up on the list because it is so bonkers, so violent, and like the sort of movie that makes a mark. Like, you remember this movie because it's like, whoa, that was crazy what went down in that film. But when it comes to like the actual like storying and characters, it's weird. Like, you don't really figure out who the lead character is until the end of the movie, and the reason you figure out he's the lead character is because pretty much everyone else has died. He's like the only one left. It's also a movie where it's like every act had a different villain. So it introduces a villain for the beginning of the movie and you think, oh, the movie's about stopping him. And then the middle act introduces someone else. You're like, oh, it's about stopping him. And then you get to the third act and you're like, oh, it's about stopping him. And so it just kind of keeps shuffling around that you don't really know who you're rooting for. You don't know who you're trying to stop. It's just a lot of carnage and a lot of dead bodies from beginning to end. So if you like carnage candy, be on the lookout for this one. Just know, on a plot level, story level, character level, there are some issues. Number 7, Triangle of Sadness. Now, this is a movie I went into knowing almost nothing about it. I'd seen one picture of a lady vomiting. I'd seen another picture of people on a yacht, and I saw some description about rich people on a yacht. And then I heard that it won the highest prize at the Cannes Film Festival. That's all I knew. I didn't really know what to do with that. And watching the movie, I didn't know what to make of it until, well, I'm still not quite sure what I make of it. But it's a movie that's very dark satire of the upper class. It's that kind of movie of just kind of these various different out of touch rich people and kind of reversing roles, pointing out their hypocrisy, that sort of thing. And so like it starts off with this male model, and my previous experience with male modeling only came from the movie Zoolander. So I was seeing this new version about this guy who's a male model and he's dating a Instagram influencer, and they're talking about who's going to pay for dinner and getting into a big fight about who's paying dinner because he believes everyone should be equal. Everyone should be equal, and that means that she should pay for dinner too. And so it's just stuff like that. And the dialogue's like really snappy and funny with the way that it's done. And then they're not really the lead characters as you go into the movie, but it spends a lot of time setting them up for the first 30 minutes of the film. And then you kind of go on this yacht and you meet all these other kind of rich, kind of out of touch people. And it's just very much sending up the hypocrisies of the worldview of all these kind of different people. And at times it can be really, really funny. It also feels way too long. The movie's like 2.5 hours long, and it easily could have been like 2 hours long, and just everything kind of felt stretched and dragged out a little bit, and it peaks before you even get to, like, the movie's in 3 parts, peaks before you even get to the third part. Like it just goes wild and bananas when they do the captain's dinner, which has the sequence involving the lady vomiting that I mentioned before. And it just goes so weird, wild, wacky, over the top. And then it ends and you think, oh, I guess this is where the movie's about to end. No, there's a whole third of the movie left. And it just kind of felt like it kind of kept going. So it's a movie that there was so much to process. Like, I walked out of the theater and they told us beforehand they were going to be asking for people's like quick thoughts on the film on the red carpet. And I get out of the movie like, I need to process that for like a long time because I don't even know what I just watched. And there's so many ideas, characters, satire, all of it just kind of thrown at you. And you even get to the last shot, it's intentionally ambiguous. It leaves things open-ended and as to what does this mean? Where's this headed? Why is this person doing that? What will she do? It's very ambiguous kind of where it ends. And so you just leave the movie and you have to like sit there and process it. And they're like, hey, can you give us your immediate reactions to it? I was like, no, I don't know what I think about it. So what I can say is that it definitely made me laugh a lot. It also felt way too long to me, felt way too dragged out. It had some interesting ideas. Some of them weren't quite as interesting. Some of them felt like you were really trying to make a point that wasn't quite there. So it kind of had all the different feelings you can have about a movie. It swung for the fences. Every time it was at bat, it swung for the fences. Sometimes it knocked it out of the park, and sometimes it struck out. So I don't know where you place that in a ranking like this, but here it is at number 7. Number 6, The Banshees of Inisherin. This is a dark dramedy about 2 friends that have a falling out. And one of them doesn't want to be friends with the other anymore, and one of them doesn't understand why their friend is dropping them like this. And essentially, it plays that out through the entire runtime. It takes place on this very remote Irish island. It's a very self-contained small community where everybody kind of knows each other. And the whole movie is about these little interactions between people, and this one guy trying to understand why his friend doesn't want to be his friend anymore, and the audience trying to figure out what's going on between these 2 people, and just has like just this really sharp dialogue to it, just very nice, like, funny humor that's always underplayed. It doesn't feel like big, gigantic joke setups. It just does it just right. And great performances. Colin Farrell in the lead one on this one, just doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Mary Keegan in here as well. A lot of familiar faces. Just everyone doing a great job. Great performances. Beautiful scenery. And like a weirdness to it. Like some of it plays like very grounded in the way that it plays out. And then the stuff that the guy does, the friend that's trying to push the other guy away, the stuff that he does to try and push Colin Farrell away is so over the top and extreme that it's hard not to laugh at it, while it's also like, whoa, that's messed up what just happened. And so it's a movie that's kind of this exploration of the way that friendship people go in different directions and have different goals. And I don't know, it's just an interesting little film. Probably a little bit slow for me to watch in the middle of a very long film festival where you're watching 3 movies per day at a film festival. This one was kind of right in the middle of it where you start to feel the slump in the middle of it. So I wish this would have been like a day 1 movie, or maybe towards the end where you're kind of getting your second breath or second wind. This one came out right as I was starting to feel the weight of the film festivals when I watched it, so I was a little bit tired. But real snappy, clever dialogue with some great performances and interesting ideas. In 5th place, Terrifier 2. And this is where doing a ranking like this is just kind of bizarre. Because the last 2 movies on this list are kind of like Oscar bait movies. They're the type of movies that might be nominated for Best Picture, with fantastic cinematography, amazing performances, exploration of the human experience. Terrifier 2 is intentionally a schlock fest. It exists to just like gross out the audience with just like the most horrifying, crass images imaginable. But I'm trying to rank these based off of like, what was my enjoyment level? What was like, wow, that was cool. What did I appreciate? What was an awesome experience? Watching Terrifier 2, opening night of Fantastic Fest, with the guy that plays Art the Clown and the director 2 rows in front of me, with an audience full of people that want to watch Terrifier 2 at midnight. That was a cool experience. That was a fun experience. And wow, this movie leaves a mark. This is one you will not easily forget. If you're not aware, the original Terrifier is a ultra low budget slasher film that was infamous for just being utterly brutal with the violence. And introducing this character, Art the Clown, that's just so sadistic. He's like charming and funny, and then a sadist that tortures people to death. Very light on plot and high on ultra gore. Terrifier 2 does like a pendulum swing and goes, okay, we didn't have enough plot and characters in the first one. All right, let's do Terrifier 2. It's 2 hours and 18 minutes long. 2 hours and 18-minute long Terrifier movie. So they just pendulum swing to like, all right, let's really kind of give a backstory about this family, and there's a mythology kind of going on here. There's a magic dagger built into it, and we'll have plot, we'll have backstory, we'll have mythology, we'll have an epic showdown, we'll have dream sequences that are reminiscent of like Dream Warriors, Nightmare on Elm Street. We're going to throw everything in there. That's what this movie is. Driving back from the theater, my buddy Cody Leach goes, if there's one word to describe this movie, it's excess. That is this movie's biggest, the best thing about it, that's the worst thing about it. There's too much of everything. It's just so excessive. That's its charm. That's its biggest flaw. If also, as I certainly alluded to this is not for the faint of heart. This is not entry-level horror. This is for people that love very gory, graphic, messed up stuff. It goes all out bananas with this movie. In the first movie, they talk about the scene where the girl's upside down and he pulls out the hacksaw. This movie, they're going to be talking about the bedroom scene. And it goes on a long time. And the second time you think that it's over, it's not. It's going to keep on going even longer and has even one more little punchline to the whole thing. That's how crazy, wacky, jacked up this film is, and I had a blast with it. It's so weird, it's so over the top. And here's one of the cool things about it. If the first one was trying to give us a new iconic slasher, this one's trying to give us a new iconic final girl. And with the same subtlety the original one handled the gore, this one handles the subtlety of this new final girl, where she literally is dressed up as like a warrior Valkyrie for the entire runtime of the movie and has a magic dagger. That's like the type of movie that you're watching here. It's crazy, it's wild, it's over the top. And if you like this kind of thing, go watch it in the theater this weekend when it comes out with like people that want to watch this. It will be a blast. It will be nasty. It's nasty, gnarly, all that stuff. Check it out in that context. I mean, it's not great cinema. There's some issues here with the movie raises a bunch of questions that aren't answered by the time you get to the end of it, and it's really frustrating. There's plot holes, there's problems here, but it delivers the experience that you want from a Terrifier 2. Number 4, Marvel Studios' Werewolf by Night. And as I mentioned in my introduction to this video, I go to Fantastic Fest normally because I'm trying to avoid kind of mainstream cinema, because I watch so much Marvel, DC, all of these incredibly mainstream, very popular, big, gigantic franchises. I go to Fantastic Fest to be introduced to other things and have more variety in my cinematic diet. But this year they decided to have the new Marvel Halloween special, Werewolf by Night, as one of the secret screenings. And it was kind of funny because in almost any other context, being the surprise audience that gets to be at the world premiere of a Marvel project, everyone would be like, yeah, high-fiving each other, including me. In this context, it was actually kind of a bummer for people in the room, because we go to avoid mainstream stuff like Marvel, and then they surprise us with the stuff that we're trying to avoid by being at Fantastic Fest. It's kind of an interesting vibe of like how cool it was to be at the world premiere of Werewolf by Night, a new Marvel thing, first Marvel thing to premiere at a festival. We were there for it, and it was still kind of disappointing in other senses. It's a very interesting vibe. All that said, it made sense for it to debut at Fantastic Fest. It's a horror throwback. It's like a throwback to 1950s monster movies, the classic 30s, 40s Universal monster movies, except set in the MCU. It's a monster movie, so it can be a little bit campy at times. It has cool action that's shot in a way where you can see everything taking place, and it's actually gory and violent. Like, it's black and white, so it doesn't come off nearly as gory and violent as it probably is, but like, when you're in a fight, arms get cut off and blood pours on the ground, blood sprays on the camera, heads get cut off. Like, it's that sort of thing in the MCU. And so it fit at Fantastic Fest. I thought it was nice and refreshing. In fact, my biggest issue with it is it was only 50 minutes long, and when you have to introduce a new set of characters, a new lore and mythology, and a conflict to overcome and have twists and turns all along the way, 50 minutes isn't a lot of time to do that. I wish it had been like an hour and 20 minutes. I don't even mind that it's short. I love that it's a short, simple, straightforward, self-contained story that's part of Marvel Studios in the MCU, but at 50 minutes, it's probably a little bit too short for all of that. But I saw it and I went, man, I hope that Marvel Studios does more of this. Just kind of these self-contained little experiments, a risk, telling a story that's not about world-ending consequences. It's all in one location. It was on real sets. It wasn't all CGI. That real fight choreography, a lot of practical stuff going on. So I really dug what it was. I just wish that it was longer. Real quick, before I give you my top 3, I have done full reviews for a bunch of the movies that I watched at Fantastic Fest. I'll have a pinned comment down below with all of my full reviews that I've done. I highly encourage you, if you've watched through this video, pick out some of the more obscure stuff and actually track it down when it comes out. Don't just watch big, wide release mainstream stuff. Dive in deeper into cinema. Have more variety in your cinematic diet. That's how you really have a way to appreciate what's good and bad, is when you see a lot of different stuff from a lot of different types of filmmakers from different countries. And I know for me personally, I need to do more of that and not just watch all these franchises to do rankings. That's why I went to Fantastic Fest. And that's why I tried to watch a whole variety of different types of things while I was there. But they got that pinned comment down below where you can check out some of my full reviews for these projects. In third place, Bones and All. This is the latest film from the director of Call Me By Your Name and Suspiria, two films that I have not seen before, so I didn't know what to expect going into this movie. I don't know if a trailer had been put out prior to me watching it. I know one was put out last week, but I definitely hadn't seen a trailer for it. I hadn't read a synopsis. I just went in cold and experienced it with absolutely no idea what to expect. And it turns out that this coming-of-age road trip cannibal movie actually is quite emotional. It's a very poignant, beautiful film about these people that are essentially monsters, where the way that it kind of handles the characters in it, it's sort of like vampire mythology, but they're not vampires. They just eat people, and they're trying to figure out how to live, how to love, and what it looks like to just try and live your life when you're a monster. And it's a movie that all throughout it, you're not quite sure who to trust, what they really want. Everyone, all of our main characters that we spend time with are dangerous by their nature. They're not really trustworthy. They're not really in control of themselves. All of them have done things that they regret, that have hurt the people around them. And they're trying to find someone to connect with. They're trying to find someone to love and to be loved by. And it takes this pretty wild and ridiculous concept and makes it this interesting study of humanity and people and the way that we're wired and how we want to fit in and how we want to be accepted and loved. And I just thought that was really interesting. And it also could be incredibly graphic and violent, which 15 minutes into the movie, I didn't know what I was watching. And then there's a sequence involving a finger getting bitten that still is haunting me over a week later. Like, whoa, that was nasty. That was really, really gross to look at. And it kind of balances just these beautiful relationships and beautiful scenery with these people that can be monsters and horrible graphic imagery. This movie had actually a lot in common with one of the movies I mentioned earlier called Blood Relatives. Both of them are about someone that is a teenager that is kind of a monster, and they're trying to reconnect with family and discover who they are. Both of them are road trip films. And I felt that this one just kind of did it better. This one had a bigger budget. This one had a lot more resources to it. It had more star power. It had a lot more things going for it. But this one I just thought really had packed an emotional punch. The real standout in this one was actually Mark Rylance as this guy that is supposed to be very creepy. And you don't know, is he just a weird guy? Is he good? Does he have good intentions? But he just is so disconnected from people that he doesn't know how to relate to them properly without coming off creepy, or what exactly does he want here, and just gives a wonderfully awkward, uncomfortable, uneasy performance that everything that guy shows up in, he is so good in. So this is one I didn't know what it was going into it, and I thought it was very effective. Our runner-up, Hunt. This is a Korean spy espionage thriller film based off some real-life events in the early 80s that I'm not really familiar with Korean history to know the specifics about the events, and so I was a little bit trying to play catch-up while watching the movie. It stars and is directed by one of the stars of Squid Game, which I still haven't watched yet, so it doesn't mean a whole lot to me, but maybe for you it does. And as for me, as someone that likes action movies and likes spy espionage thrillers, this was just a bunch of stuff that I like merged together. In particular, the action in the movie is very reminiscent of the classic John Woo Hong Kong films, his heroic bloodshed films, A Better Tomorrow, The Killer, Hard Boiled. It has the visceral, dynamic nature of those action sequences, minus the real specific John Wooisms, doves, slow-mo, people spinning, sunglasses indoors. Like, it kind of shaves off the overly stylized John Woo elements and keeps just all the very vibrant, dynamic nature of his action sequences, where there's just like when a bullet hits something, it's shooting stuff up in the air, and the camera's always in motion, and everything just feels alive in the action sequences. But as an espionage thriller, it just kind of keeps you guessing, where the plot involves these two competing spies in the Korean CIA trying to track down a mole. Neither one of them trust each other. Both of them have very different worldviews and methods. And it's all about kind of the ends justifying the means, who's right, who's wrong, what are they up to, why are they trying to do it, and kind of making the point that it's not clear good and bad. There's a lot of gray going on, and you're not supposed to just pick one or the other. It's just a really nice job of kind of having this story that has multiple layers to it, keeps you guessing, and then has a big slam bang finale in the end that feels like it pays off the journey and the different worldview of these two different characters in the end of it. My buddy Cody kind of compared it a little bit to Departed when we were talking about it in the lobby, with kind of the nature of these kind of two protagonists in this situation. That's a fair comparison. It is a little bit tough to follow. There is a lot kind of going on, and you're introduced to so many characters, so many locations, so many events, and it moves very quickly. And when you're trying to read the subtitles on the screen, it is a little bit tricky to follow. It can be convoluted, so that can detract for some people's enjoyment of it. Someone that just likes this type of movie, action, spy thrillers, it had just a ton of stuff that I loved, so I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. But coming in first place is The Menu, and this is a movie that I actually watched the trailer for it the day before they announced that The Menu would be playing at Fantastic Fest, and the trailer itself kind of teases a little bit of this bunch of rich foodies go off to this remote island to have this luxurious dinner cooked by this very famous chef, and then it turns into some sort of battle of survival. And I didn't know what to make of that going into the movie. My buddy Cody hadn't even watched the trailer, so he just thought it was a movie about foodies. And then when someone gets killed, like a third of the way through the film, he's like, what just happened? What is this movie that I'm watching? And it is just such a razor sharp satire of elitist foodies and the way that kind of people behave in some of these contexts, and the way that they posture to impress the people around them, the way that they try to take advantage of everyone. And I don't want to say too many specific things about it because you start getting into spoilers as to the backstory of the different people. But it's just super sharp with the comedy and humor, but always understated. So it'll have all these moments that it just plays a line of dialogue dead serious, and it's so funny. And it's not this overcooked joke with a big setup and punchline. It's just, you think that they're having a line of dialogue, and then it just says something matter of fact, totally dry, and it's so funny. The audience is laughing out loud. And even kind of the way the movie works is you're going through the menu. That they have these, it's like 7 courses throughout this meal. And so whenever they have a course, they put like the food up on the screen, and they start crazier and weirder things start happening throughout the movie. And so it'll just add like 2 extra words into one of these cards describing a meal. Just subtle, just up on the screen, 2 words. And it's so funny and understated. It's not drawing your eyes to the fact that a joke's being made or anything like that. Just trust the audience to get the joke. So it's really smart. It's really funny. It's filled with amazing performances. Fiennes in particular as the chef is just so good in this movie. But I mean, everyone in the types of stereotypes that they're playing, these stereotypes of foodies that they're playing, they're all so good at it. And like I don't want to give away the jokes or anything like that, but it's all done so well. The food looks so delicious, or in certain times, food is plated so well and looks so unappetizing because it's not real food. And these people are just giving glowing reviews to there's nothing on a plate. It's bizarre. It's weird. And so for me, I just thoroughly enjoyed this one. So it comes in number 1. If you enjoyed this video and want more in-depth analysis of some of the films that I saw at Fantastic Fest, check out those reviews down below in the pinned comment. Also, thank you so much for watching this particular video. I'm not covering what I normally talk about, big mainstream franchises and stuff like that. I'm trying to cover more stuff, and I appreciate the fact that you actually watched this video, and hopefully you'll go check out something that's not quite as mainstream as what I normally talk about. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.